Hey, CDA participants. Welcome to Functional Area 3, Learning Environments. This is one of my favorite chapters in the book right here. So I hope you're ready to have fun, to grow, to see your classroom from a different perspective, and really focus on how you can make things better, not what you're currently doing and how you want to continue to do things, but this is about growth, this is about opportunity, and let's see how we can enhance our learning environment to benefit the children that you're currently serving. As you read through the material in your Essentials textbook, there are going to be 6 major areas that you will focus on. You're going to talk about the 10 fundamental principles that support learning and development, designing an environment to promote development and learning, selecting appropriate materials, planning curriculum for young children, developing your daily schedule, and implementing your daily schedule. In this particular functional area, you've got the following assignments. First, you're going to read Chapter 3, Learning Environments, in your Essentials textbook, pages 111 through 170. Next, you're going to read Functional Area Learning Environment in your CDA competency standards, whether you're infant, toddler, or preschool. While doing this, you're going to create an indoor room arrangement on a desired classroom using the Essentials textbook and the Child Care Minimum Standards. You're going to take inventory of the materials and equipment in your current classroom, and you're going to make a list of any missing items that is referred to in these booklets. You're going to complete your questions for functional area learning environments on your online portal, and then you're going to complete your quiz for functional area learning environment on your online portal at timthetrainer.com. To get us started, we're going to discuss the power of play and how important it is to see and understand what all of the learning environments, your learning centers, your equipment and activities that you have in your classroom, how they benefit and support open-ended play. Hi everyone, and welcome to our training on the power of play. I hope you're ready to bring out your inner child, reflect on some of your childhood experiences, and really look at the benefits and the value of play in your early education classrooms. My name is Tim, and I'm going to be doing this training for you today. Before we get started, let's go over some training tips for you. This training today has been verified and approved by the Texas Early Childhood Development System, otherwise known as TechPEDS. So make sure that your personal TechPEDS training ID is issued on your Tim the Trainer portal before you complete your assessment for this training. That way your certificate will automatically be uploaded into your TechPEDS account. That usually takes about 24 hours. That's going to be really helpful to help maintain training compliance with both child care licensing, Texas Rising Star, and just really help you with your own professional development journey. Make sure that you take notes on the material that we'll be covering in today's training so that you can have follow-up conversations with your center director or your leadership team. Have those good conversations with the other teachers that you work with in your program about the benefits and the value of play. If you have any questions about the material that we cover in today's training, please reach out to me. You can message me from our website up in the top right-hand corner. You can send a message. You can call me or you can email me with any questions about the material covered in today's training, or if you need more information beyond the scope of the training material, we are here for you. And just a reminder that per the Child Care Minimum Standards, all trainings must be completed in a reasonable amount of time, meaning the total number of clock hours that you complete in a single day cannot exceed the total number of hours that you worked in that day. Has to be reasonable. This is going to keep you in compliance with child care regulations and also avoid any wage and hour issues for your particular business. Our objectives for today's training is so that participants will have an understanding of the science behind play and how it relates to cognitive development. We want participants to learn to adapt activities to make them developmentally appropriate. And participants will discover how play also benefits the adult in their professional development journey. So yes, not only are we going to be talking about the children in the classroom today, but we also want to talk about you, the adult in the classroom, and how critically important open-ended play is for you. To help get us started, back in the year 2000, there was a book published that's called From Neurons to Neighborhood, The Science of Early Childhood Development. This book emphasized the importance of 4 essential aspects of learning in young children. So as you're preparing your lessons in your classroom, as you're engaging with the children in the classroom, kind of keep these 4 aspects in mind right here. Loving and caring relationships with adults. You hear me talk a lot about children needing a healthy, secure attachment figure. I actually have another training on my website that will go over that for you in detail. Many opportunities to explore the world through seeing, touching, hearing, tasting, and smelling. So a very sensory-driven, sensory-strong classroom is really important for the children that you're working with. Conversation and language enrichment in the environment. So lots of modeling of good vocabulary. Modeling the language of safety is going to be important for your children. And then look at number 4. When they talk about the 4 essential aspects of learning for young children. Play. Y'all, open-ended play is exactly what our children need. It's the best way for them to learn, especially in an early education environment. When we look at learning through play, seeing children at play means different things to different people. Most everyone thinks play is fun, including children themselves. But when asked in one particular study what their favorite activity was, 98% of children answered play. Because it is so enjoyable, many family members and some educators think that fun equals frivolous activity, right? Play, in their view, is a distraction from learning. As more and more research shows the benefit of play, it is once again taking a front seat in early education. Think a line between play, especially make-believe play, and academic success, and this has been firmly established right here. This is one of my all-time favorite quotes from Albert Einstein himself. Play is the highest form of research. Now, before we get into the power of play and what children are learning as they are playing in your early education classrooms, I want to talk a little bit about the factors that have changed in play. And my intention behind this is to really get you to evaluate what you're doing in the classroom. And even though it may be perceived as play, is it helpful or hurtful to the child? We are now going on 40 years that we have seen a 40-year decline in self-regulation. And when you look at the research behind this, the decline in self-regulation is directly coming from the lack of open-ended play. So when we look at this, what are some of the factors that have changed in play? Children not playing outside. They are more likely to have open-ended play when they're playing outside rather than more structured or closed-ended play inside. Instead of playing freely, they are involved in more structured activities such as a sporting event like soccer or t-ball, or art classes where they're coloring inside the lines or coloring by number. They're basically reproducing a pre-printed product rather than free painting, finger painting, painting on an easel that is more abstract and open. And then the other reason why we have a decline in open-ended play and a decline in self-regulation is many popular toys are linked to television and films, limiting their imagination. Instead of children coming up with their own scenarios and their own characters, they're basically just reproducing what they have seen in film and television. I want y'all to really reflect on the play that's happening in your classroom and whether the activities that the children are participating in are more left hemisphere activities or right hemisphere activities. And when we look at the left hemisphere of the brain over here, all right, the left hemisphere of your brain is very familiar. It's very verbal information, logical information. It's online, meaning we're conscious of being in a left brain activity. It's more linear. It's literal. It's words. It's letter of the law. Y'all, this is your black and white side of the brain. It is what it is. I like to call it your Sheldon Cooper side of your brain. Very factual. All right. Now, the right hemisphere of the brain is just the opposite. It's very novel, nonverbal information. So this is why we want a lot of visuals in the classroom, real life pictures in the classroom, emotional information. So how is it making you feel? What emotions are bubbling up? It's unconscious. We typically don't know that we're there. All right, it's the big picture of stuff. It's contextual, lots of images, spirit of the law, spontaneous, fun, carefree. That's the right hemisphere of the brain. So when you look at these two, left hemisphere and right hemisphere, most of what we do in early education are right hemisphere activities. How you relate this to self-regulation, the ability to compose, the ability to self-regulate, the ability to maintain self-control, those are all right brain functions. It is not left brain, it is right brain. So the more we play and the more open-ended play that we have, the more likely the child will be able to self-regulate. And we practice self-regulation through play. I also want you to be familiar with the 12 executive functions that are in the higher centers of our brain. When we are in the higher centers of our brain, this is when we can learn, this is when we can solve problems, this is when we can meet the needs of others. And play is typically based on these 12 executive functions. All right, we look at attention, the ability to pay attention and stay focused, time management, our awareness in time and what happens as time progresses, organization. All right, so if I set this pen down on the table and I walk away from it and I come back, am I going to remember that this pen is sitting right here? How things are organized in space, where things are organized within our own thoughts. Prioritization, what needs to be done first, what needs to be done second, what are the most important things that need to be done, what are the safest things that need to be done. Working memory, that ability to remember what I just did, what I have done in the past, right? Where I put something. Impulse control, so that we don't fly off the handle when the world doesn't go our way. It's that ability to hit the pause button when things are not going the way we want them to go. We look at flexibility. Flexibility is basically, the scientific term, is the ability to go from left hemisphere of the brain to the right hemisphere of the brain and vice versa. And that's a difficult transition to go from left hemisphere to right hemisphere and then back to left hemisphere. And we see this in our early education classrooms quite often when you're doing a left hemisphere activity, such as, your lesson plan or your ABCs and your 1, 2, 3s, your patterns and sequences. And then you want the children to transition to go outside to use their small and large muscles in active play, or to go to the art area, or to go to music. And then when you try to transition back into the classroom, back to a left hemisphere activity, You know, you've got a lot of kids that are like, no, thank you. I'll stay over here. So that flexibility is hard. And especially when your day gets hijacked and you lose predictability and things are not happening the way they're supposed to be happening, that's a difficult skill right there. And it's a developing skill, and we need to recognize that. Empathy, the ability to see the world from other people's point of view. Metacognition, the ability to think through a situation. If I make this decision or if I do this action, what could come next? And how am I going to handle that next step? All right. It's being able to think through multiple steps ahead of you. Goal achievement. All right. It's the ability to set a goal and achieve a goal. All right. Once you start something, you got to finish it. Right. That type of thing. And y'all, that's a skill. Definitely. Task initiation. Being able to start an activity, to avoid procrastination, right? This needs to get done and I'm going to start this. And then emotional control, right? Not letting your emotions and your feelings, jeopardize your viewpoint on something. And emotional control is that ability to push through those difficult feelings and be able to move on instead of getting stuck in that feeling, getting stuck in that emotion. So that's a very quick overview of the 12 executive functions. I very easily could spend 6 hours just talking about these 12 executive functions, but I wanted you to just be aware of them as we go through the power of play. And I want y'all to be thinking about, the 21 different activities I'm going to go over with you today. What executive function, is being practiced with this particular type of play? And we can add at least one of these executive functions to every single activity that we're going to talk about. Some of them incorporate multiple executive functions, right? But you always want to look at this. What are we working on? What are we practicing right here? And this is the other really important information for you about play. Joy and play use the same circuitry in the brain as trauma. All right? It's the same circuitry right there. The path back from trauma is through play. So when you're working with a child that has unresolved trauma, and that could be, when I say unresolved trauma, that could be trauma that they don't even know about. It could be prenatal. It could be, trauma that happened early on in their lives. A lot of people experience trauma and they don't even see the signs until years later. Even as adults working in the classroom, we have a lot of adults that still have unresolved trauma, okay? Trauma that hasn't been addressed. Well, when we play in the classroom, okay, the path back from trauma is through play. And that's why we see so many different organizations out there, like the Life is Good Playmaker Foundation, incredible organization that supports children with unresolved trauma. And do you know how they do it? They do it through play, just getting out there and having fun. So don't undervalue the power of play. Not only is it preparing the children for academic success, it's also giving them the social and emotional and mental support that they need, all right, to get through some of those difficult times that they're either going through right now or they've been through in the past. And the more the adult gets involved in the play, the better off it's going to be for everybody. So there's a couple of different ways that I have used the material that I'm going to go over with you today. All right. Number one, it's really good for the early educator to understand the meaning and the value of open-ended play. But this is really great to help educate parents. I've taken all of these slides that I'm going to share with you today and I've printed them out and basically put them next to the learning centers all around the classroom so that, when a parent comes into your room and they see children playing in the block center, they don't just see children playing in the block center, but we have it right there posted next to the block center that, they're learning to cooperate with others. They're learning to express their ideas. They're learning to create patterns, create and repeat patterns, which is a math skill, right? And labeling your learning centers and labeling some of your activities with what the children are learning while they play is very educational, and not just to the parents, but it's educational for the teacher too. This is something I've done for many, many years now. When I have teachers put up a bulletin board, there are a few different things that should be included in every bulletin board. Whatever the project is that they are displaying, but I want real life pictures of the children creating that project. And then I want just a little narrative on that bulletin board about what did the children learn while they were creating this project. So that way you're not just displaying the children's artwork or their project, but you're also educating the adults on this is more than play. This is education. All right. That's what we're going for right there. And it's to help you make sure that you have all the appropriate materials and equipment in your classroom to set the children up for success. So you can kind of use this training today as like a scavenger hunt, to make sure that you've got everything in your classroom. And, we'll kind of talk about how to adapt some of these activities to where they're developmentally appropriate. And we want everyone to be very familiar with developmentally appropriate practices. And this is the latest version of this book right here. We don't want to overstress the children. We don't want to push them into an activity that they're not developmentally ready for. All right. So we want to be aware of that right there. And that's going to take your talent and your skills to adapt them to make them appropriate for the individual child that you're focusing on. All right. So here we go. This is one of my favorite trainings right here. I just love going through these slides with you and really getting you to understand the value and the meaning of play. There's such cool stuff going on right here. So when we play with blocks, cars, and trucks, the children are learning the concept of shape, sizes, length, and location, all relative to learning to read and to do math. So as they're building those bridges, they're constructing those cities, they're making those tall towers right there. Y'all, this is reading and math skills. To see themselves from a different perspective, all day long. Children have adults that are like standing above them and they're always having to look up at the adult, right? Well, when they're playing in the block center, it's their turn to be the giant. It gives them that self-confidence, that self-image that they need, the healthy self-image. To create and repeat patterns, which once again is a math skill. To exercise their imagination, that's open-ended play right there. We need the open-ended play. To express their own ideas and that their ideas have value. All right, so this is where your encouragement is going to be really important. To cooperate with others, to practice that empathy, right? When you've got a child that works really hard on building that tower and then it gets accidentally or intentionally knocked over by another, how does that feel? What does the world look like from that other person's point of view? About the properties of wood, taking that block out of the block center and getting some wax paper and a crayon and rubbing it and creating that pattern from the wood, the properties of wood, and having good scientific conversations about the property of wood. So yeah, there's a lot going on right here in the block center. There's 3 learning centers that when you're observing your children and you're doing assessments on children, when you're trying to figure out what is the factor that's creating a behavior, what is the child's version of reality like? Block center, home center, and dramatic play. is where you really need to watch and listen to what the children are saying and doing. This is where you're going to see the world from their point of view. All right? You can learn a lot right there. When a child is stringing beads, number and proportion concepts such as more, less, longer, and shorter. And as the adult, you're going to be modeling this language. You're teaching new vocabulary and adding new vocabulary for the children to create and reproduce patterns and sequences. Once again, that math skill right there. Eye-hand coordination. We're going to work on this quite a bit because it's going to take a while to master this skill right here. But that eye-hand coordination with the stringing of the beads, and it's not the eye-hand coordination from using this. You know, that right there. We want it to be, you know, while play and not play on a screen. The concept of color, shapes, and location, and pride and accomplishment. You're going to see that pride and accomplishment pop up on several of these. It's that joy juice that is released from our brain when we do something well, those natural chemicals of pride, right? And that's what we're going for right here. When a child is playing with a puzzle, all right? Puzzles are fantastic, and I feel like puzzles are kind of going away a little bit, and we need to bring them back. And I think the reason why I don't see as many puzzles in classrooms anymore, it's not because the children are not interested in them, it's because the adult doesn't want to deal with them. That's what I'm seeing right here. But you can see there are a lot of amazing skills that are being practiced when children play with puzzles. About relationships of parts to a whole. So when they've got the table and they've got a solid surface and then they're putting the puzzle pieces on top of the table, that's the relationship of the parts to the whole. All right? That is a math concept right there. We've got the eye-hand coordination as they're handling the puzzle pieces, or with the younger classrooms, the little knobs. Concept of shape, size, color, and location. Vocabulary related to the subject of the puzzle. So again, lots of open-ended conversation between the adult and the child as they're putting together the puzzle. Problem solving based on the cues of the puzzle. This is helping also with composure, with patience. About the negative and positive space, seeing something against its background. That's what I was talking about with the table just a minute ago. That is a math and reading concept. Self-confidence as they learn to solve more and more difficult puzzles. Independence as they use puzzles without help. One thing we know about puzzles is that most children prefer to do puzzles independently. Puzzles is typically not a group activity. You're going to see that they learn more when they do it independently if that's what they choose to do. All right? We don't want to dictate that. We want it to be a choice. But you'll see that most of the time they prefer to do puzzles independently. Sorting. All right, how many of y'all, your puzzle pieces get all mixed together, right? Now, sorting it by like color, by like shape, right there as you group the sets of puzzle pieces. But then always before you put a puzzle out in the classroom, especially if you're in an older classroom and you've got 20, 25, 50-piece puzzles in a pre-K room or a school-age program, number or put some type of indicator on the back of the puzzle pieces before you put them out in the classroom. So that way, if they do get mixed together, you turn the puzzle pieces upside down and you've got a whole new different sorting activity right there, putting together those like pieces. If you do have puzzles that get mixed together and it's like, this is hopeless, we're never going to be able to get these sorted out, don't throw them away, because then you can add it to your collage materials, right? You can do collages, picture frames using puzzle pieces. I've had teachers use mix match puzzle pieces on their bulletin board for borders. Mother's Day gifts, Father's Day gifts, but definitely add it to your collage area. Can do some really cool stuff with it right there. Cooking projects. This is another one that, man, we just don't see enough of this anymore. And I understand we got to have safety. All right, safety always comes first. We also have food allergies we need to be familiar with, so we don't want to expose a child to a cooking project that could include a food allergy that they have a reaction to. But there are a lot of benefits from doing cooking projects in your early education classroom. You can talk about nutrition, taste, and the different food groups, about the relationship between the part and the whole. So once again, there's the math concept right there. How heat and cold changes things. When you've got water and you put it in the ice tray and you put it in the freezer and it comes out and it's completely different. It's hard, it's solid, right? But then just the opposite when you're warming something up. I just remember being in a pre-K classroom and the children being so fascinated by bread. And we made bread, for the kids, and they did the dough and the kneading. We had the flour, but then you put it in the oven and you heat it up. And when it comes out of the oven, it is a completely different, product. The way it smells, the way it feels, the way it looks, than how it went into the oven. You got some really good conversations that you can have right there. The concept of volume and measurement. The awareness of their own and other people's culture, and of course, the vocabulary that comes out of cooking projects. When they're painting on an art easel, to develop their imagination and creativity, to notice patterns from a background, very necessary when learning to read. The eye-hand coordination, helpful when learning to write. the names of colors and how to make new colors, and let them mix those colors. I've seen teachers that are like, don't mix the colors. No, let them mix the colors. Let them experiment right there. The names of the colors, how to make those new colors, to distinguish shapes and purposely create new shapes. The concept of symmetry, balance, and design, to express their feelings and ideas, that their ideas have value, and the relationship of space and size. When children are finger painting, it's to exercise their imagination and creativities, to have fun sharing ideas with others who are near. They love it. They get so excited when they're close to each other and they're finger painting. About mixing the colors, and again, allow them to mix those colors. The concept of shape, size, and location. The eye-hand coordination with their fingers on the finger painting paper right there. And this is my favorite thing about finger painting. It's an appropriate and acceptable time to make a mess. And y'all, we always need to tell children what they can do, not what they can't do. They need to be able to make a mess every once in a while. They got to get it out of their system. Finger painting is a great time, okay? You want to make a mess, we're going to do it while we finger paint, okay? And you can make this very age appropriate, whether, you're in an infant toddler room, you can do it with whipped cream, put some food coloring in it. Once they get a little bit older, you could do it with shaving cream that's non-toxic, right? And then you can move on to the finger painting again that's non-toxic, doesn't have lead. So if it does go in their mouth, it's going to be fine. But lots of different ways that we can make this age appropriate. I talked about collage material earlier. So when they are playing with paste, glue, and other collage materials, they get to exercise their imagination and creativity. The concept of shape, size, location, and design, once again, a reading skill. About things that are sticky. About things that have different textures. And for some children, you're going to have to ease them into this, right? If you have some children with some sensory issues, we're going to have to ease them into this. How to create patterns and designs and to distinguish the pattern from a background. But especially, we talked about children with sensory processing disorders. This is very common with children with signs and indicators of autism. They're going to be resistant to paste and glue and collage material. But it's a great way to slowly and safely introduce this to them in a manner that's not going to create a meltdown. Don't force them in too quick, okay? But you can do it nice and slowly. Musical instruments. How many of you still have musical instruments in your classroom? I hope every single one of you. Remember, this is about the children and their development and their learning, all right? Not about the adult and what you can tolerate, okay? But so much we can learn from musical instruments. Listening and auditory discrimination, skills that are very necessary for learning to read. The concept of fast and slow and loud and soft, right? And you're going to practice all that. We're going really, really fast, and then we're going really slow. We're going to go really loud, and then we're going to go really soft. To be conscious of the rhythms of music, to express yourself in a new way, and to interpret signals and cues. Now, I know I mentioned in the last slide about children with sensory processing disorders and children with signs and indicators of autism. You're going to notice that with music and musical instruments, these children are normally very, very good at this, all right? They will master music in a way that you won't see the other children. But that's good and that's important because these children typically struggle with social and emotional development, especially pro-social behaviors. They do sometimes struggle with communication. being able to communicate through music is a safe way to communicate. So we want to pick up on that and acknowledge that. So that's really cool. When they're playing with scissors that are age appropriate and scissors that are manufactured for the particular age of children that you're working with, you're controlling the small muscles in their hand. We don't get a whole lot of opportunities to do this right here. The concept of shape, size, color, and location to exercise their imagination and creativity. And if you're working with children that are 2 and younger, you can replace the scissors with ripping paper, right? And you can pretty much get the same skill set by just ripping the paper, because we've noticed that it's very difficult to find, an age-appropriate pair of scissors under the age of 3 that actually cut paper. But we also, always keeping safety in mind right there. When children are dancing, allow them to dance, encourage them to dance. You need to be an active participant right here. Your enthusiasm and your joy is going to feed those children. They're learning to express themselves physically, to be conscious of the moods and the rhythms of music. They're going to be learning balance and coordination. Something about it when we're dancing, we kind of go down to the ground, even as adults. If a child falls down, encourage them to get back up safely and keep on going right there. We don't want to belittle them. We don't want to shame or embarrass them, all right? Because this is going to happen, that they may go to the floor. But as long as they're not physically hurt, encourage them to get up and keep on going. Lots and lots of dancing. We need our moderate to vigorous physical activity in the classroom. This is a good way of getting those activities, especially on those rainy days when you can't go outside. Have yourself a dance party. Make sure that's on the lesson plan so it counts towards your active play. But the kids love it. The teachers love it. You just got to be that active participant right there. I mentioned earlier, we have to tell children what they can do, not what they can't do. Children need to climb. It is one of the ways that children learn to explore is through climbing. So if you don't provide them something appropriate to climb on, they're going to find something on their own, all right? So when they are climbing, they're learning to cooperate with others when involved in dramatic play. They're learning self-confidence as they develop a new skill. And if you don't believe this one, just watch a toddler. When they make it to the top of that table, right? They're like, they're so proud of themselves. Now, that's not an appropriate piece of equipment for them to climb on. That's why we have to provide them with the appropriate equipment. But they will show you that self-confidence whenever they get on top up there. Physical strength, coordination, and balance. We don't think about physical strength too much when we're working with young children. But that exercise, that active movement, those physical activities, right? Children need to continue to get stronger and stronger, just like adults. Very important for the development of the small and large muscles. To use their imagination, to solve problems, all right? Lots of good stuff happening with climbing equipment. Again, safety's always first, okay? I work with an attorney that always says what goes up must eventually come down. So you always need to be within close distance, preferably within arm's reach of a child that is climbing, because once they go up, eventually they got to come down. So we want to keep them safe right there. Playing in home center, I mentioned earlier, this is a very important center for you to observe and assess what's going on in a child's life, their version of reality. When children play in the home center or dramatic play, the 3 most common adults for them to pretend to be is mom, dad, or teacher, right? And I'm sure you're going to see this daily in your home center or dramatic play. And what I really like is when they pretend to be you, and you might be going, oh, I don't sound like that. I don't talk that way. Really? Because that's the child's version of reality. So It's a good way to do a little assessment of you too, right? But again, when they're playing in home center, we have the opportunity to solve problems, especially socially, through negotiations with others, to improvise and use things in a symbolic way to represent something else. This is a form of abstract thinking right here. To be flexible in their thinking, to express themselves in sentences, to try on different adult roles, to sort and organize playthings, to make decisions, to carry out their ideas with the cooperation of others, and to exercise their imagination and creativity. And allow them this opportunity to explore. It doesn't mean, one thing or another. It's simply an opportunity for them to explore. Puppets. This brings back so many childhood memories for me right here. And again, I think this is kind of a lost area. I don't see as many classrooms with puppets anymore. But there's so many cool things that come out with development when children play with puppets. It's so cool. To express their ideas in words, right? And especially because they're speaking from another version of reality. So while you may have a child that's struggling with emotions and feelings and struggling with their ability to express themselves, when they can pretend to be someone else, this tends to be a little bit easier right here. To communicate with voice tones as well as words. Again, I've seen so many children that I've tried to get them to express themselves and they just can't do it. But when I get them to be a character and to talk in a different voice tone, they tell a whole story, right? So it just kind of allows them that freedom to express themselves in a safe way and to use their imagination. Again, you can really learn a lot about what a child's version of reality looks like when they're playing with puppets. Playing with sand, this is another one that we are not seeing enough of this anymore. I understand that it can be messy. Sometimes, parents don't really like the sand, but there's some really cool skills right here. And this can be done in a safe and sanitary manner. It just needs to be managed right here. But the concept of warm and cool, wet, damp and dry, heavy and light, to create their own patterns and symbols, which is reading and writing skills, to create systems for classifying, ordering, and arranging, to exercise their imagination, the concept of shape, size, and volume, to distinguish between empty and full, kind of like the activity I told you about earlier with the vase, how to use tools. So you got the little rake or the little shovel, the little bucket, to solve problems, how to play socially with others, and to observe change, which is a science skill. Speaking of science, here's one of my favorite learning centers in a classroom, the Science Center. We always want to make sure Science Center is by a window if possible so that we can bring nature into the classroom. If you can have water accessible to the Science Center, that's always helpful right there as well. But plan these incredible age-appropriate science activities in your program. We've got new vocabulary going on here, the concept of texture, color, weight, and size, to group objects into categories and observe likenesses and differences, to appreciate nature and develop that sense of wonder. Y'all, something that we are lacking in today's society. When we talk about the lack of open-ended play, what we need to focus on right here is curiosity. Curiosity feeds open-ended play. And nothing is going to bring curiosity out more than science. All right, so this is some really cool stuff right here. When you're playing with Play-Doh or clay, all right, to see the shape against the background of the table, that's that reading skill. Very similar to what we talked about with puzzle pieces earlier. The concept of shapes and relevant sizes. So big, small length and height, to see the negative space when a cookie cutter is taken away. That's important for reading right there. To express their feelings. It's that appropriate time that you can squeeze and pound and get those big feelings out right there. To exercise their imagination and creativity. And that the amount of substance remains the same even when the shape changes. So if you get a big ball of Play-Doh and you ask the children, how much Play-Doh do I have? And they can give you an answer. And then you can roll it into like a tube. And you're like, okay, now how much do I have? Well, it's a little bit smaller, but it's a little bit thicker. And then you get the rolling pin out and you get the rolling pin and make it really flat. Now how much do I have? Well, you have the same amount. It's just taking different shapes. So really cool conversations that you can have with that activity. When you're playing on riding toys, once again, safety first. Make sure you've got your helmets when applicable. If you've got tricycles or bicycles, your elbow pads, your knee pads when applicable. And make sure that there is a safe surface that is free of other obstacles to create a safe path for children to ride on. But when children are riding on tricycles and bikes and toys, it's the strength, the balance, the coordination of the large muscles to use their energy in a constructive way. The concept of speed, direction, and location. To use their imagination as they pretend to be different characters and make different noises. To negotiate and take turns, because I'm sure you don't have enough tricycles for every single child in your program. To solve problems. It's that self-confidence as they master a new skill. Y'all, these are all really, really important tasks right here. Riding toys, so awesome. I know a lot of people are afraid of the safety risk, but you got this. Just put some boundaries in place. Have some good expectations. Use your visuals so that we can show children what they can do, right, in the appropriate way of doing it. When they're looking at books and listening to stories, that learning to read is an enjoyable and relevant to your world. That letters on a page represent words. It's talk written down. The meaning of more and more words, so you're building that vocabulary wall. I've done this in many pre-K classrooms where we have a vocabulary wall, a word wall, that we add a word, a minimum of 1 word a week that we're adding to that vocabulary wall. To express their own thoughts, their feelings, and their ideas better, to exercise their imagination, to interpret pictures that represent new ideas, to actively listen to the spoken word, to make up their own stories, to handle books with care, the value of a well-done illustration, to recognize words when you see them in print, to use more complex language patterns in speech, and to follow a plot. I could probably do a 2-hour training just on this particular slide right here. There's a lot going on when we talk about looking at books and listening to books. And one thing I'm going to encourage you, books are fantastic. I'm a huge advocate for books. Lots of age-appropriate children's books in the classroom. But make your own classroom books. Children value the teacher-made books more than anything, especially if you can create stories and take pictures using the children that are currently in your classroom. They love it. And laminate it. Save it to where you can easily reproduce it when it gets destroyed, because it's going to get destroyed and that's okay. All right? But those teacher-made classroom books are like 20 times more valuable than anything you can buy at the bookstore, in my opinion. All right? Especially when the children can see themselves and hear themselves in a story or in a plot. Make sure that it's appropriate. Make sure that it's encouraging. Don't belittle anyone. Don't shame anyone. Don't make anyone a bad guy, right? But really cool stuff that you can do right here. Participating in circle time. This is my other favorite time in a classroom. I love circle time, all-time favorite. But to listen, to sit still and understand the spoken language, and sometimes not to sit still. All right? There's nothing that says you have to sit down and be still in circle time. You do what is best for that child, what is going to keep them engaged, what's going to keep them safe. And if they need to stand up or they need to sit in a chair, as long as they're engaged and they're not hurting anyone, pick your battles wisely, okay? To add ideas to the discussion, that your ideas have value, to wait while others are talking, and y'all, that is a skill that has to be practiced. You can't just assume the children know not to interrupt. We have to practice this, all right? New vocabulary connected with the topics of the discussion. To remember words from songs and poetry. I bet every single one of us watching this video, no matter how old you are, you probably still remember something that you learned in school that you learned through a song, right? Whether it's the states or state capitals or the presidents or, so many things right here. The ABCs. Many of you, when you still file something, you probably do the ABCs in your head. So lots of cool stuff right there. All right. The names of other people in the group. It's a great way to learn other people's names. To cooperate and be considerate of the needs of others. So there's that empathy, flexibility. And to help plan what we're going to do and when we need to do it. So remember, we talked about task initiation. We talked about prioritization. All right. So we can pretty much touch on every executive skill just in circle time. All right. So lots of cool stuff right there. When they sort things. All right. Sorting. This kind of goes back to the puzzle pieces earlier. But to notice details like likenesses and differences in objects, to form categories, the concept of color, size, and shapes, the numerical concept of more and less, all right, and logical reasoning. We got to practice a lot of logical reasoning right there. And sorting things and learning about the logical reasoning, that goes back to pro-social behavior. It goes back to cooperation. It goes back to empathy, right? So that sorting of different objects in the classroom, there's a lot of valuable skills right there. And the last thing that I have is when you're singing songs that you learn at school, the principles of music and rhythm, vocabulary, memory skills and sequencing, to be considerate of others, to be conscious of others, auditory discrimination skills, recognizing the differences in sound, various concepts emphasized in songs, and the awareness and identification with your culture and other people's culture. So really cool stuff. And here's the great thing I love about singing songs. This is not American Preschool Idol. No one cares if you're a good singer or not, if you're in key or not. And children prefer to hear their caregiver's voice over any recording. I was working with a group of schools in Montana a couple of years ago, and we were having this conversation about the benefits of singing songs in the classroom. And we kind of came up with a challenge that would they be willing to go 30 days where all of the music in the classroom came from the teacher. And instead of playing a recording or a CD or an MP3 or streaming service, that the teacher would sing the songs instead of using a recording. And we started it with, the willingness to go 30 days where the children were hearing their own teacher sing instead of the recording, and they accepted the challenge. And then it went from 30 days to 60 to 90 to 4 months. And now when I follow up with those schools, they don't even use the tablets or the MP3 players or the CDs anymore. It's all about the teacher singing with the children and encouraging the children to sing. and they talk about the difference that it's made in their classrooms and how it's created the equitable school culture. It's really cool. All right. So maybe that's something that you would be willing to practice in your classroom. All right, so that is the power of play, but we're not done with this training yet. I'm going to give you a couple of little assignments that I want you to do to complete this training. First off, I want you to go through your classroom and the 21 different slides that I just went over. How many of these different learning centers or activities do you have in place in your classroom at this time? And how can you incorporate more? The other thing I really want you to look at is those executive functions. And every learning center that you have in your classroom and every type of play that you have in your classroom, how can you tie in more and more of those executive functions, those 12 executive functions that we mentioned earlier in the training? The next thing I want y'all to look at, and this is going to take a lot of reflection, I want you to pull out your most current lesson plan, all right? And I want you to look, how much open-ended play do we have versus closed-ended play? Open-ended, it's still structured, there's still routine, there's still predictability, right? But you're allowing the children to use their imagination. You're allowing the children to use curiosity to see a whole new world, right? They're coming up with their games, their identities and their characters. The children are coming up with their plots. Versus, how many activities do you have in your classroom? How many activities do you have on your current lesson plan that are closed-ended? Where you're looking for a particular character, a particular plot. You're looking for a very particular outcome. All right? And the ratio that we normally recommend right here is a 5-to-1 ratio. So having closed-ended play is okay, but it's on a 5-to-1 ratio. All right? 5 open-ended projects versus 1 closed-ended project. And that's kind of a really good rule of thumb right there. And most of your younger classrooms, your toddler 2-year-olds, most of what you do is probably going to be open-ended play. And don't get open-ended play confused with free play. All right? Free play is not open-ended play. When you tell children, just go have free play, go do whatever, you've lost structure, you've lost routine, you've lost predictability. So you can give choices, all right? You can go play in the block center, where you can build roads and bridges with the blocks, or you can go to the art easel, where you can paint with feathers. Which works best for you? All right? So those are open-ended. All right, you've got choices right there. It is still considered child-directed play, but you've given them a choice. So I've been able to maintain the routine and the structure and the predictability. The predictability came with my suggestions, right? You can build roads and bridges with the blocks. You can paint on the art easel with feathers. So we want to establish that sense of predictability right there. All right. So, lots of really cool information. I hope you all enjoyed this training. Super cool right there. Enjoy play. Get down with the children and play with them. Don't just hover over them. The children want you to play with them. Your brain wants you to play with them just as much as they do. All right? Have fun with it, y'all. Thanks for participating in this session.